think that's a big part of being able to blend right into the industry once you get there. You know, it is a beginning class, so I don't expect the students to, you know, even have that high of a level of draftsmanship. And I try to accommodate for different levels of draftsmanship and experience, so you don't have to feel overwhelmed or anything, and we just kind of work through whatever issues you need. And I've talked to a lot of teachers who teach at DreamWorks and at Pixar and Disney, and they, you know, try to get as many teaching advice as I can. And I think the big one is just trying to get the students to think a certain way about storytelling and movies, and I think everything else comes after. So if I can get all of you to think and watch movies a certain way and to notice certain things, I think that's the major goal. And obviously with all the assignments, all the homework assignments that you do, you end up kind of starting a portfolio, kind of a beginning portfolio for yourself. So that's a great part of it. I think my portfolio was made up of all the assignments I did at college, and like I said, I tried to put together the best assignments I could get that I could think of that I've gone through myself, and challenge you guys to do it. And I think you know, obviously there's demonstrations and there's a class on portfolios, but I think one of the valuable things I noticed from the last term was the Q&As. There's a 1-hour Q&A each week that it's really nice because we get to collaborate. We get to brainstorm together and work through story issues, and we'll come up with an idea and do an exercise and actually board out something or draw out some gags and try different things. So that way you get a real experience of what it might be like in the day-to-day. And that's about it. Did you have any questions or?
Well, there's a few questions that have come in for the most part, and I'll try to get to as many as I can in the short time that we have. But the first one asks, what is your process going from script to boards? And if you have any images you could show for that, possibly, it would be cool.
Sure. Yeah, let me see. So can you see this?
We can see, yeah.
I don't know why. I have this habit of asking anyways.
No. I mean, your webcam is lagging in the back there, but...
that's okay. Well, let me just explain that. You get your script pages, and it's happening more and more that script pages are relied on pretty heavily. So, you know, they try to hammer out the script page pretty strictly, and obviously, depending on your director, some directors are very strict about keeping tight to the script, and then other directors are very lenient. They let you kind of make up whatever you want and use the script as solely a starting off point, a jumping off point. And obviously, I think the ones that are more script tend to be directors who write as well, so they're director-writers. But you'll get your script, and then you kind of read it over, and then you meet with the directors and they launch you. And what that means is they basically give you whatever materials you need, references to look at. And when I do this demo, I'll show you kind of what I've prepared for myself for this demo. And you ask as many questions as you can about the sequence and what their intentions are, because obviously, ultimately, your job is to get the director what he wants in the sequence, and then to add whatever entertainment and business that you want. And then you get busy and you start working on the script. I mean, you start reading through the script, you thumbnail on the script sometimes, any images that come to your mind. And obviously some people have different methods and stuff like that, but I tend to do little thumbnails. I don't overly thumbnail every single shot. And then you start boarding and you do roughs and you kind of refine it, and you refine it until you turn it over to editorial, who puts it together in kind of an animatic type thing.
Okay. I think that actually answers the next question of how much interpretive freedom do you have when working from a script. Do you think you want to have any?
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
It's fun, you know, and also it depends on when you come onto a production, what phase it's in, because, you know, production goes through a long timeline, and we cover this in the class and everything in more detail, but you know, sometimes it's a 3-year production, a 2-year production, or 4-year production, but sometimes you come on in the last 2 years or year and a half where things are kind of solidified in a big way. I was fortunate to go on to the movie Crudes, which comes out next March. Go see it. And I got on relatively early, so things were very blue sky, you know, just up in the air, and they're still figuring out the characters even, and so I got to give a lot of input. I got scenes where they launched me and said, you know, oh, this character and this character are doing this. Do whatever you want. Make it fun. Explore it. And so sometimes, you know, being on a production early is nice, but then none of that stuff ends up on screen because you go through so many iterations. But then near the end, you know, liberties and freedoms get dwindled down a little bit, but there's always meetings where you brainstorm ideas that you can just spitball things, and you can throw out you know, make big contributions to ideas and to the story itself.
Okay. So if you want, you can start your demonstration, and then we can ask questions as you continue ahead.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. I'm a little nervous. It's hard to perform in front of people, but you know what? I found in the Q&As that this was, I think it's enlightening, you know, just to see how people work and everything. I did some thumbnails. I ride the train to work. I commute, and I just had a ballpoint pen and a white piece of paper and just kind of doodled some ideas out. I thought about, you know, coming up with an idea, but I didn't want to with you guys and improvise it. But I thought, you know, I should be prepared with this many people. So I went ahead and drew some designs. As you can see here, I drew this boy here and this girl, and he's going to go rescue her. I knew I kind of clinged to this image in my mind of this kind of a monster breaking through like a bridge, like an overpass, and chasing this car. So I started doing some designs of this car, and I tried to draw the freeway overpass, and I ended up turning that into a shot. And then I drew some of the monster, and obviously this stuff isn't fully fleshed out. I'm not a designer, but it's enough to kind of keep a consistency. So I think it's good to know what you're going to have to draw in your scene. As far as, you know, the background and the characters and some of the props, as you know, as far as how important they are. And then this one you're looking at now is just some thumbnails that I started doing. I started taking them around, and obviously, actually, this drawing here was actually the first drawing I did, and then I went back and thought, you know, I should do a drawing empty frame. And the basics idea, this isn't a complete story, it's more of a moment, because we don't have time to do too much more. But the guy comes in, he's going to yell out, he's looking for his little sister. And then this monster arrives, kind of crashes behind him, looms up above him. He's kind of panicked. The monster kind of does a roar, like a threatening display of some sorts. And then there's a POV shot from a car. And if this were in reels, you know, you might have the sound of the car and the music kind of building up. And then a car comes and grabs him, pulls him into the car just as the paw crashes down. Now, these are barely legible. I probably wouldn't show this. I mean, some people will show this to a director. Some directors like to see this type of thing. I usually do this type of thing on the script page just for myself. If there's certain imagery that or certain, how do you say it, laying out the scene, the logistics of where they are on the set, kind of like blocking actors in a movie, in a live-action movie. You kind of have your stage, and you kind of figure out where the actors are going to move on stage. You know, this, you know, if it's complicated, I might just do something like this. So then I had the monster mad because he missed him. But now we get some distance as they drive away and have a quick chat, and I kind of wrote some rough dialogue. It's totally irrelevant. I'm not much of a writer that way, but. And then we see the car, and then the guy crashed behind it, which is the monster crashed behind it, which is this shot here, which I was really glued to. Been wanting to do this shot for a long time. I don't know why. And then this is kind of a pan shot where we pan down, have the car stop. We see her behind this dumpster, and he gets out of the car, talks to her, picks her up, and is about to go back to the cars, and when it gets hit by the monster and it flips into the air, crashes, and then the monster turns his attention towards them by the dumpster, and then we end it there. So hopefully I can get through all of that. And it's, you know, this is going to be like a rough first pass. I might try to clean up something for you guys towards the end. What do you think, Ted? Do you have any other questions while I start kind of
I'll ask them as we go, but I think this one you can probably answer quickly, is how can this be applied to the video game industry?
You know what? Action stuff, you know, video games are not starting, they've always had, you know, really strong narratives and storylines and stuff like that, and there's always the cinematics that play just like movies. So I actually think it's one for one. In fact, I actually think there's more cinematics in that sense, where there's more thought put into some of the movements. I think they're very innovative in video games. Now, mind you, the class that I teach is mostly geared towards feature boards, but like I said, I think it's almost one for one. In fact, but you know what? I haven't actually worked in the video game industry, and I haven't talked to as many people as I should talk to in that work in video games in order to get a sense of how much they actually board. Because you know, part of me wonders if they just do a lot of you know, work in previs and layout, meaning they just do it right in the computer rather than drawing it. You know, so that's something I can you know, try to find out more about. But it's a good question. And again, there's TV. There's certain things that are required in TV boards that aren't required in feature, you know, and vice versa.
Okay. This next
so right now I'm just kind of drawing a background, a rough background. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, so right now I'm just drawing a rough background of kind of, you know, I think the first drawing is always the hardest to do because I get anxious about how to get into the scene. But if I just get past this, I know I can have a breakthrough and start building momentum, because I think the sequence of shots kind of comes to, you know, each shot is kind of motivated by the previous one. So I kind of want to just have this, like we had in the thumbnail, where is that? This kind of a lone shot, make it feel empty, that way the monster comes in. And again, pulling out, having a background, creating some sense of space. And I've lowered the opacity of that background layer, and I've added another layer. And this is a panel that I use at work that everybody uses, kind of. It's a 2:3:5 scope ratio, and it's got the little dialogue strip built in. Some people will actually invert it so it's black, so they don't have to see that extra white space down at the bottom. But this is kind of what everybody uses at DreamWorks, and I'm sure Pixar and Disney have similar things, and Sony and Blue Sky. Most of the feature feature board artists use Photoshop. So Photoshop is good to know and to have. So I'm going to start with a blank stage, put him in, and I've created some shortcut commands in order to duplicate these groups, and then I save them out. So I've lowered the opacity, kind of blowing through this real quick. Okay, Ted, sorry. Go for it.
No worries at all. The next one was, do you ever have to storyboard a scene specific to a musical piece, kind of like Once Upon a Time in the West was based on the music?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I guess I didn't know what Once Upon a Time in the West, but I know that, like, you know, the old musicals, like the Disney musicals and stuff, yeah, they would board and they would actually just play a radio thing. There is, you know, there are ways to sync it to music, I guess, when you pitch, but when you're boarding, yeah, I think it's one of those things like animators do. They just listen to the audio over and over and over. I actually haven't had to sync up music to anything yet. In fact, a lot of times editorial will pick out music, but I have had one scene where I picked out music to create a mood, and it was a scene that had no dialogue, so I went ahead and just pitched it to some music to create some suspense, so I didn't have to describe everything. That way it felt like they were just watching it, you know.
Right. And will you be teaching in the fall?
I hope so. We'll see. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I plan on it.
So let me see these next set of questions.
Like I said, the first shot is always the hardest for me, but once I get into it, you get a rhythm and stuff, and and you find shorthands and stuff for the characters.
I have a good question. What do you do if you can't draw well?
You know, it's funny because there's a mix, you know, because each movie is made up of a story crew of maybe, on average, I think at its height or its average, 8 or 9 people, and everybody has a little something different to offer. You know, some people are very good at action scenes. Some people are comedy gag people, you know. They're really good at doing funny stuff. Some people are good at dramatic stuff. So everybody kind of has strengths and skill sets, and you get cast accordingly. Now, mind you, there's good and bad, you know, to being typecast. But you know, if you don't draw as well as another guy, then he'll get those scenes where the draftsmanship is important, and you can get the scenes where the writing or the characters or the gags are more important. So there are things to do for artists that don't draw as well, but you will have to draw well enough to communicate your idea, and in order to because I think back in the day you used to be able to sell it in the pitch and just be a very good verbal communicator, but I think more and more the reel itself has to communicate your idea without you pitching it, and so you kind of have to draw well enough for it to read on its own, you know, if that makes any sense.
I think so. The next question
Should
would be...
we name this person? Go ahead.
Cindy. I want to say, so what should a storyboard artist's portfolio contain, especially when applying to a major studio?
Hold on. Storyboards. That's a horrible answer, but it's true. People send a lot of people feel like they can just show that they draw in a story portfolio, and typically the studio will get it and go, we don't know if this person can actually do boards. So I think the first and foremost thing is to be clear that it's a story portfolio. You can even put story portfolio on the cover, and the first things they should see, you know, is storyboards. You know, I think a lot of people applying for story may think that, you know, oh, I have character designs and I have some painting, background type paintings, and they think they can get by with just showing that and hope that you can figure out storyboarding on the job. But they really want you, when they hire you at a bigger studio, they want to be able to plug you into the pipeline and expect out of you what they would expect out of someone who's been there for 3 years. So it's good to be exposed to stuff, which again I think is the good thing about this class, is you'll be able to be exposed to what it looks like, what the boards should look like, and then that way you kind of know what they're expecting from the actual professionals, you know. And I bring in examples during the Q&As of other artists besides myself, so you can kind of see the range. And obviously there's a lot of stuff on the online today, but there's actually not as many boards as you would think. But yeah, in a portfolio, story portfolio, just make sure you put storyboards. I think too many people don't put storyboards. And maybe put different types of scenes, you know, like a dramatic scene, an action scene. Comedy is definitely one of the more valued in the industry because we are dealing with a kid's medium. No, I shouldn't say that. But you know what I mean. Most of the business generated from feature animated movies are from children and families that go to the movies. I'll put it that way.
Huh?
So that's typically what the product is. So it's good to show them what's in the product. Because I think another thing people do in portfolios is they put things that are a little too mature, more mature than what they're doing at the studio. Now, mind you, if it's really well done, then they know that you can apply it towards something different as well. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
And I got another question here that seems pretty interesting. In preparation for a 3D animation, I think this is Jason asked, I have been creating my storyboards by taking the actual 3D scene and rig model and posing out the positions and camera angles in 3D, then taking a screenshot into Photoshop and tracing the forms. Is there a disadvantage to using this method?
No. In fact, I think what's cool is in CG you get an exact lens and camera shot, and the spatial relationship between objects is very defined in a CG space. And so what's great is if you're drawing on top of that stuff and wrestling with that all the time, you're going to be able to draw that even without the reference, in my opinion. Like right now I'm trying to draw that background really roughly, but if I was dealing with real things all the time, real things being in the CG, you know, technical space, which is much like real life, you know, I think you're gonna have more spatiality, if that's a word, to your dimension to your boards. I think it's a good habit. You know, they don't do it that much in professional boarding. I have heard of a couple people doing that, in a couple of shows and a couple of instances, depending on the scene. Obviously, it might take more time, but if you are good at doing that in a very quick way, I think it'd be a good advantage for you. I don't see where it would hurt, and I think it could only help, but it's not necessary as well. So it's one of those things. Wow, that's a bad drawing, but you know what? Photoshop.
Awesome. Another question, what's the hardest idea / concept / way of thinking you've ever needed to pass on to your students?
That's a great question.
Kind of tough.
Let me think. Hold on, let me just blur this guy real quick.
Oh, no problem.
I'm going to motion blur this guy in the back.
It's cool that you can emphasize the drawing more if you have to. That's cool.
Let me push through this real quick. What is the hardest thing I've had to communicate to a student or pass on to a student?
Yes.
Kind of the question?
Basically. Like idea-wise or concept-wise.
You know, like I said, my goal is to kind of make sure that people are actually learning and improving upon what they need to improve on. I'm trying to lead myself into the answer here. And I think, you know, I emailed, this isn't meant to name drop or anything, but this actually helped me a lot. I emailed Mark Andrews because, you know, he was kind of a mentor for me when I was up at Pixar. He just directed the movie Brave. I emailed him and said, hey, you know, you've taught a lot of story classes. I'm going to be teaching. Is there anything, what's the most important thing to you that I need to get across to my students? And he said it's knowing how to think about movies, knowing how to think about story. And I think what he means by that, because he's lectured me over and over the years, and is just, it's you know, it's funny is because I think he was a very technical-minded, this is just my opinion, he was a very technical-minded, technical-oriented type person. And I think once he had started directing and once he had to communicate to others what his vision is, it's all about the story motivations and the character motivations, and shots were kind of secondary to that. And obviously they're very intertwined, the two. But I think it's hard to communicate to people how important it is to be able to think of where you're headed, kind of like in a chess match, like think 5 moves ahead of where you're going so that you land on certain shots and you kind of propel your scene to that direction and kind of land on it appropriately. And I think as far as a very black and white, straightforward answer, the 180 rule is something that I think a lot of students struggle with, and I know I struggled with it big time. That was something I got hit hard on a lot when I was first starting to board, and you know, every now and then it still comes up, so even people who've been doing it for a while sometimes forget, so that's something to keep in mind as well. The 180 rule is essentially keeping characters on the right side of the frame in order to not create confusion. Now, mind you, it's not as big a deal in some aspects, but because animation is such a slow process, I think there are a lot of sticklers for it because they're looking at it every day, looking at it very closely, and looking at it in detail. I think it's something that people get beat up on. So now I'm going to shake this a little bit, shake the screen here a little bit because the monster landed. And I'm actually going to, I don't care about that. I'm just going to merge all these layers and blur them. Cool. Hopefully that answered. What do you think of that? Was that a decent answer for you?
I think that was more than decent. Hopefully they got it.
Okay.
I have a technical question. What ratio should we use for our boards? Regular 16:9 HD format or Cinescope 2.35? It says some DreamWorks artists seem to be using both. And this is Olivia.
This is depends on the show you're on. Actually, the movie that you're working on. Some movies are a certain ratio, but for your own personal stuff, I think it's good to wrestle with everything. I actually wish I had wrestled with TV format more, so that I could cross over easier. But you know, the widescreen is what they use for it in the feature, and obviously I think it's all going to be kind of wide because of wide TVs. People are playing video games on widescreen TVs. Wide format, I think, is much more valuable to a studio if they saw your portfolio of boards. Like I said, people who are non-artists, they just look at the one-for-one. Does his drawings look like what we use? And I think that's a good way to just assess what you should be doing. I'm going to blow through this. This is going to be some ugly stuff, but you know what? It should be pitchable, which is what I tell them sometimes. They go, how fast can you do this? And I go, well, I can make it legible in 2 days, but then I can make it less legible in 1 day, but I can still pitch through the idea verbally. Depends on... I'm going to lower him.
Now, when you're pitching your boards, are you using editing software to compose them, or are you just going through Photoshop's layers and revealing them?
You know, sometimes if I'm working right up to the deadline, I'll pitch it just like I'm doing right here. So the guy comes in, runs in, and I'm just clicking each layer and making it visible. Looks around, boom, he turns around, and there's the monster. So I'll just pitch it that way, but typically I'll export these. They've created an action where I can export each group into a JPEG, and then I'll pitch through the JPEGs in just a common Finder window or, you know, Windows, what do you call that, preview?
Well, the Windows view, yeah.
Yeah. So now I know I want to pan up to this guy, and I know I'm not going to be able to fit it unless I did some crazy fisheye. Well, this will be a somewhat of a wide-angle fisheye lens thing anyways. Like I said, I have those designs if I needed to clean it up, but right now I'm just going to use shapes. That's the other thing is your refs will use a certain shape language. Each of your characters should have a little bit of a design shape language so that they read in a simplified format, because you're not going to be able to do stuff that detailed. So I know I want to land on this shot. Hold on. I'm going to start panning it down, even though I'm going to be going up. Let's see. He was in this type of pose, I think. One before. That's something you should check, but I am blazing. Okay. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, no, you already answered it. It was related to basically how you present the work.
Yes, yes. Okay, so this is my first shot. And then I'll do one here. I'll pan it down. And then I'll cushion it, which is kind of like an ease in, ease out type terminology for animators. Actually, it'd be cool if he's standing up. So, wait. That's my first panel. I'll go to the second panel. No, I'll stay here. I'm going to stay here and have him start moving here. I'll move it down a little bit here. There. That way it's different. I'm going to have him move a little bit like this. And I'm going to have the creature, oh, I guess it would start in here. I'll have him here. Problem is I'll have to have something to track so people know what's going on in the background. This is a power line, a light pole. I'm going to lighten it. I might even blur it just so that people don't look at it. Whoa. And then I'll copy that into the next frame. That way when it's moving. Now I'll draw. Let's see. It's kind of, what's great about boards, well, it's great for some people, I guess. Some of the old-timers don't like it as much because old boards used to have less panels, but nowadays they have a lot of panels. But I like animation, so I actually like doing all the panels. Oh, I lost my background, so I copy that, put it into the next one, and then drag it down so that's tracking. I might have to add to it. Hold on. How am I doing on time here?
You're doing fine.
I think we're doing okay.
Yeah.
I think we're doing okay. I might get through this. I'm not going to get too complicated here. I'll just merge this down, copy it, put it in the next one. Any other questions?
Sure, actually. Are you resolving timing issues for animation at the storyboarding levels, or is this something that is resolved at the animatic editorial level?
We do quite a bit of detailed performance in the boards nowadays, including, you know, I'd say it's like animating on 16s, if that makes any sense. Between 8 and 16s, which is kind of, I don't know, half a foot of footage in animation terminology, but it's, I guess what that means, I guess, is kind of if there's 30 frames a second, there's a, it was funny, James Baxter used to be able to snap in the timing of different frame rates. It's kind of a spooky scientific thing. The guy's autistic or something, but you kind of yeah, we get pretty detailed with stuff, but obviously the more subtle things get done in animation in the next phase when it's animated in CG later on. And I kind of go over that in the class too, the actual pipeline of the movie, not just the pipeline of the story department, but the pipeline of the entire a movie might go through, starting from development all the way to the music at the very end. So, you know, I think that's a very cool thing to have in a class. So expose you, and you got to know where you fit into the situation, you know. Okay, so what's my next shot? Let's look at this thumbnail real quick. So I have this. The guy rises up. Oh, he does the threat. I'm going to do one more oh crap shot by the kid. And then we'll do the threat display. Man, this is bad. You know what's funny is when you draw enough, you kind of have a default guy that you draw all the time. This is my default guy that I draw all the time. This is the guy that my go-to character, I guess. People tend to have designs that they, yeah, you know what I mean. And again, I like to just put something in that background to make it feel like it's got some dimension to it. Whoops. What else? Got anything else, Ted?
Oh, sure. What is a finished level for boards? Stick figures versus fully rendered images?
Yeah, it's funny. Dragons, How to Train Your Dragon was so rushed because Chris Sanders didn't have very much time. Him and Dean didn't have very much time to do the movie. Most of the finished boards that were put into the reels were very, very rough. But you know, things do get refined. It depends on their deadline, and sometimes the directors just want a proof of concept that they can look at. They're trying to find their movie is essentially what's happening. They're trying to find their movie, and the sooner they can kind of get a proof of concept of whether it works or not, an idea works, you would think you'd be able to figure it out in script format like live action people do. They commit to a lot of money and time and everything just based off of a script, and I think animation's getting closer to that. But they still like to, it's such a visual medium, they like to just go ahead and visualize it. You know what, this character's meant to be mostly in shadow. Whoops. And I didn't mean to have him too visible. So I am going to shade it. But a finished one might be just me going over this one more time with a little more fine-tuned line, but not perfect. It's not going to look like an inked comic book. And then maybe adding a layer of shading, you know. Now, mind you, I should have shaded a lot of these too. I'll just do it real quick. Promise not to take up too much time here. So hopefully that answers that question. It's not too refined, I don't think. But
I guess
again, it's as much as you want it to be.
A follow-up question would be, in terms of drawing, is there a way to train yourself to shorthand and simplify things to make things more economical while boarding?
Absolutely. And you know, sometimes you don't find out till you're doing the job, or you might find out, you know, the directors really like the style of this board artist, so people riff off of that, they'll mimic it. So basically, all I'm trying to say is that sometimes you'll figure it out over time. I know the first 6 months of working professionally was bumpy, man. It was a bumpy road because I had to learn kind of what the standard was of what it should look like. So like I said, it's something you feel out. Feel out. How do you say that? I'm going to cut him out so you see him. I'm just going to use a lasso tool here. But yeah, I think that's another thing in the portfolio that I think is pretty good to keep in mind too, is that putting different levels of polish in your portfolio so that they know what they can get from you in a short amount of time and in a long amount of time. So if they want you to clean something up, you have examples of that in your portfolio. And if they want you to do something in 3 hours, they have examples of what you're capable of that way too. So having different levels of polish is good to have in the portfolio too, to show what you can do if you're given the right amount of time, if that makes sense. And so that's why it's good to label, you know, first pass, second pass, or final pass, or whatever, and so on and so forth in your portfolio, what they're looking at. Does that make sense? I always ask that question.
No, it's perfect. And actually, in line with what you just said, there's another question I think you've kind of already answered, but I'll still ask it. It says, "Hey Stephen, I work in motion graphics as an art director. I'm fairly new to storyboarding, and I find that I'm constantly battling developing story with simultaneously solving design issues. Do you have any advice, tips, strategies to accomplish this?"
Say that one more time. You're saying that
so
you're constantly getting wrapped up with the design part of it instead.
Basically, I guess it's trying to juggle, you know, the developing of the story while also trying to solve the design issues about that very story when storyboarding.
Yeah, you know, I think people would be surprised to know too that, you know, it's so simultaneous. A lot of times the design informs the story, and vice versa, and it does go back and forth even in a professional setting, you know, where they've done it tons and tons of times. There's constantly a back and forth. You know, they have to design what we're coming up with, and vice versa. We have to limit ourselves to what art has created, what design has created for us. So there is a give and a take, for sure. But let me think. How do I phrase it? Does that kind of make sense? There is a back and forth. There's a dialogue that always happens between design and story. And like I said, it informs one another. A lot of my film ideas for school, short film ideas, came from doodles that I just did. You know, a lot of people will come up with designs and you know, doodle character designs and then base stories off of them. I don't know. I hope I'm answering your question.
Well, you basically are. I think that but the other part that they wanted to know was in regards to any, like, I guess, particular, like, advice or techniques for approaching that particular problem, you know, like trying to juggle between the two. How do you approach tackling it? Like,
well, I guess because I don't deal with design very much, like I said, I'm able to just go ahead and start from this, and I'm as strict as I need to be. But the cool thing is, when you're telling a story, it's like an improv class. Sometimes you find things, you find objects that you want to incorporate, you find things in the set that you want to interact with, you find character things like a writer might decide, oh, I really want to have the character have a scar. You might just allow yourself the space to have those happy accidents happen, just like they would on a live action set. So I think, you know, staying open-minded to it is important. That things can change and evolve while you're in the process.
Perfect.
Okay, let me see. So I'm going to try to start blazing here. So I wanted to do that POV shot. So here's a third character, which I didn't design, so this should be interesting. A lot like that question, huh?
Yeah.
How am I going to make amends for this? I don't know. You know what? I don't like that. Why did I do that? I'm going to take the character out here. Okay. I'm going to expand this. And this cabin will be dark. I'm going to lighten the opacity after this. There. Now, once I figured out that, I'm going to do the camera move. Whoops. What is that? What's that? Just merge that. All right. Whoops. Now we do the adjustments. I guess it's not mega important that I finish this. As long as you get to see the process of some of it, that'll be good. Do you have another question?
Sure. Do you ever directly analyze a sequence someone else has done to see what kind of choices they made when boarding, and then figure out what stuff you might like to use?
Say that again?
Do you ever directly analyze a sequence someone else has done to see what kind of choices they made when boarding, and then figure out what stuff you might like to use?
Absolutely. That's a great question, yeah. I haven't done it a lot. I've done it indirectly. One time I had to shade boards for on Dragons. I shaded some of Tron Mai's boards. And Tron is a very gifted actor in his boards. He's one of the best subtle performance type board artists that you could get, you know. And so I indirectly study his boards frame by frame because I was shading each and every one of them. But I find that was one of the biggest moments of my improvement. I felt like I improved more during that time than any other time I was working professionally, because I was studying it frame by frame and seeing how he draws things. So yeah, I think that's one of the great methods. And actually I asked another guy once, like, what do you think is the best? Oh, Radford Seacrest, you might know him on the interwebs. He mentioned, you know, just studying frames is studying movies, and copying frames from movies is probably one of the best techniques to use for studying. So yeah. So you can see I was spreading those things out. You kind of got to fill this stuff out. Some stuff is going to be right, some stuff isn't. But like I said, this is just for proof of concept real quick. I'm just going to, these don't have to be precise because it's a, that's not very good. I'm just going to move these up and down. Whoops. Okay. We got 10 minutes. This is terrible. We didn't even get to the cool part that I wanted.
No, but you can go over. It's okay.
Okay. All right. Give me 3 minutes here. Let me just blaze through some of this.
No problem. And for those of you in attendance, please feel free to check out more information about Stephen's class by going to our website at cgmwmasterclasses.com. You can find more information about his class as well as other classes, but just check it out, and yeah, any questions you may have, just write to info@cgmwonline.com, and we'll be able to answer any questions you may have.
So I'm setting up some visuals. I know this is a complicated action, so I'm trying to set up. You leave stuff out, and it's actually good. Sometimes more detail just makes it more cluttered to look at, because you're going to be looking at this stuff in such brevity, if that's a word, in such a short amount of time on screen, that the more simplified is actually going to benefit you, because people will know where to look. See, if I had stuff over here, it might be too busy. I needed to, I don't know how this could happen in real life, but he's reaching out as he's driving by. That doesn't make sense. It's okay. We're going to do it anyways. Here, maybe he's... I told myself it's a robot driving the car, so he's really gifted. So he turned the car sideways. Check that out. I have him turn this car sideways so he can reach the guy. Man, this doesn't make sense. It's cool though, man. It's entertaining. I'm going to have the hand coming in right now, too. Wait. I'll put some effects in there. Effects animation. That's what I thought I wanted to do at one point. I wanted to be a 2D animator or 2D effects artist. I'll put that background, sorry. Oh, you know what? I wanted him to kind of go around the corner. So he gets grabbed. His feet go flying. You know what's funny is this, a lot of people, some guys are really good at blurring. It's kind of a tricky thing sometimes, blurring. Dude, this is a mess. Don't tell people you saw this. This will stay between us. Watching. It's so bad. I'm going to put that paw in the next shot. Which frame is that? Here it is. I kind of want to set the trajectory before it falls, even though I know it's good for suspense. I don't know if you notice I'm coloring layers here. I like doing a new color for each new shot. This is my OCD side. See, he comes by, he misses the guy. I'm going to have the paw come down. Whoosh. I make sound effects too. You don't have to, but it's fun. This is fun. This is a passion. This is a job that I'm passionate about. I love storyboarding. I love movies. And this is the fun stuff for me. Okay, and then I'm going to move the entire camera here and track with the other car here getting away. And now I got to draw that paw in a frozen form. Wow, that's a horrible paw. But you know what? The image isn't meant to be awesome on its own. It's meant to be in context. So that's the thing, man. Storyboards don't get seen. They never see the light of day. You know, sometimes it'll be in an art of book, but not very often. So they're meant to serve a function. That's what's most important. I'm going to be lazy and just do that for now. Ooh, drives off. I wish this background had more detail. Okay, So that's that. They're going to have a discussion in this car. Did you already give me 3 minutes? You probably did. I'm just going to keep going. Let me see.
You're fine.
They're going to be in the car. This is the robot. This is the other dude. It looked better in the thumbnails. Maybe I should just take the thumbnails. Maybe I'll do that. You dare me?
Go for it.
Boop. There. That looks better. So they're driving in the car. They have a conversation. And then
so your thumbnails basically serve as an outline of what your rough story is going to be.
yeah. So he jerks the wheel. Can you see that? I don't know if you could see that change in this.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. I wanted this guy more over, so I'm going to just cut up. Move him over. So he flies over to the side of the car as it turns. Alright. Any other questions? Let's do it.
There's a fairly involved one. It's a simple question, but he has a little lead up to it. The question is, it says, from what I've understood, you benefited a lot from the trainee program that some companies offer. Any idea or suggestions on how to get in touch or be introduced to these companies if you're currently too old to join a trainee program and you're working in a parallel field? I think the person asking the question says he's working as a concept artist for the game industry, was thinking about trying to step into animation as a viz dev artist, for example. So do you have any ideas or points on that?
See if you can summarize it again.
I guess the summary would be someone who isn't necessarily in school, who's working in a parallel field to what you're doing right now, but is too old to go through a trainee program. What options would they have to, be introduced to a DreamWorks or any other studio for that matter for a job like storyboarding or biz dev?
The DreamWorks one, you kind of have to keep your ear to the ground and kind of catch when they're doing it, because sometimes it's not every year that they do that training program. But it's a good way in if you don't have professional experience. So Pixar also does a story internship. Typically, they will get students. They typically don't get professionals or people that aren't in a part of an institution of sorts. But yeah, they'll take people from a lot of different schools. It's not just Cal Arts, but there's a lot of other places that they take from as well. I think like there was one from USC the year that I went. There was a kid from another college. It wasn't a big college. I want to say it was like Santa Monica, maybe something. But yeah, being attached to a school is good. Being a student is good. You get a lot of opportunities that way. But opportunities, you get, there's different outlets, and it's just a matter of checking out people's websites, companies' websites, see if there's what they offer. There's a blog called characterdesign.blogspot.com. What I think is invaluable about it is they interview people, and there are standard questions, and people will tell you exactly how they got their job. So if there's a certain job that you like, you could look there and see what their path is. There's so many different paths. But the training program for DreamWorks was cool because they kind of walk you through the process with a fake movie before they put you onto a real movie. And what they do is put you in a room and you'll pitch your scene at the end of your 3 months. You'll pitch a scene to all the heads of story, the directors, the producers, so basically all the leadership of the studio, and they'll kind of fight over who gets who for their movie. And it's cool, that way if someone picks you, they know what they're getting into. They know what you're capable of or not capable of, and you can get started that way rather than being thrown into the deep end with no experience. But I find that's a really cool avenue. there was a guy that comes from comic books. So the DreamWorks one is pretty open-minded. They take people from a lot of different places, you know. There was a guy, Radford. He did comic books or whatever, and he got in to the training program. We went together actually, and he was able to get, he had the draftsmanship already, and then it was just a matter of figuring out what the studio wanted from him for the pipeline, if that makes sense.
I think that's perfect. So the DreamWorks program is open to different backgrounds. You don't have to be a student or anything like that to get into it.
Yeah, you don't have to be a student. In fact, they sometimes take interns that do production. They're in the production end, so some people will do internships for, like an office boy. They'll go and make copies of things and then when the internship comes around, the training program, comes around, they just apply and they get wind of it, when it is. It's typically, I'd say, around April or May of each year, but this year they didn't do it. Some years they don't do it.
Okay. I guess another question would be, what are some movies that you can recommend for people to practice on storyboarding with?
If you go to my site, Frame Filter, I've put together like a lot of screenshots of different movies, and the purpose of that was to kind of analyze and study movies from a photography standpoint. The thing is, I guess, is you don't get as much story. You get more cinematography and composition from doing that, but it's invaluable either way. And you'll notice you'll find your favorite you'll find your favorites movies and storytellers, and just look up their movies. Cinematographers, you can track it that way as well. Sometimes I'll watch a movie just because the cinematographer is someone who I admire or whatever. I would recommend, there's a movie called Visions of Light that talks about cinematography. There's also one called The Cutting Edge, or Cutting Edge, not to be mistaken with that figure skating movie, about editing, and I think that's a big part of our job. And then all the making ofs of like the early Pixar movies from Incredibles and back. I find the ones that came afterwards are not as valuable, although I haven't watched a lot of the Blu-rays recently, so maybe there are some good bonus features on there. But watching making ofs and deleted scenes is a good way to inform yourself on stuff. But yeah, movies to study. There are certain storytellers, and again, it would be just my taste. But I like a lot of the early Spielberg movies. I like some of the early Shyamalan movies. I think he had some innovation. I like David Fincher as a visual storyteller, and Guy Ritchie. They're very they have a lot of innovation to what they do. A lot of new techniques, and exciting techniques. What else? The Academy Awards, they do the best screenplay and best picture and stuff like that. Those are usually good movies to watch and study as well. I'm a big Zemeckis fan. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. I put Back to the Future on a short list of movies that are near perfect that I don't know how they could improve, except, maybe updating the special effects or something, which I hope they never do. But you know what I mean? I think there's, obviously people have different tastes too. Okay. Right there. I want this guy to crash through right now. Here he comes. You know what? I want him on the previous panel. I'm almost there. After this shot, we'll cut it. Any other questions?
I think this one relates to what you're doing right now in general. Given that this is an action scene, what are you thinking of when choosing shots and framing? Joshua says, I assume it's more of an osmosis thing as you watch more and more films and the like. When you started out, was shot choice something that ever became paralyzing?
Yes. It's funny because sometimes I find picking shots, I find I'm most paralyzed when I'm trying to work with what someone else has done, if that makes any sense. A lot of the job is doing fixes, And a lot of times you're doing fixes on other people's scenes, surprisingly enough, that you're doing adjustments to other people's sequences and vice versa. They're doing adjustments to your sequences. And I think that's kind of paralyzing because now it's, you know, you thought and motivated certain things. I always joke, I compare it to like you designed a car, a two-door car for 2 people or 3 people to fit into, and now they come back to you and go, oh, we want it to be 4-door, and you're like, okay, well then I adjust it, and we want it to accommodate 8 people, and you're like, well, that's a totally different thing. So a lot of times you are adjusting a lot in order to accommodate the director's things, and you know, it's not about ownership of your sequence anymore. It's about getting the directors what they want, and that's a hard part of the job. So I always find the funnest part is doing your first initial pass because you get to orchestrate it in great detail, and later on it gets torn and ripped to shreds by the directors and the editorial staff for good, you know, because sometimes you do have tunnel vision and things need to be looked at with a fresh eye. Hopefully that makes sense, but for this I'm kind of motivated. I'm trying to figure out my left to right. I'm trying to keep the monster on the right and trying to escape to the left and have that feeling going throughout, and trying to keep certain things on axis, which means like straight right in the center. Some things are symmetrical, some things are asymmetrical. Trying to change the shots so they're not too similar to each other. And you know, it's about contrast and affinity. There's a great book by Bruce Block, Visual Story, about, you know, contrast and affinity. And this is a lecture that Mark Andrews gave a lot in the early days, talking about, you know, putting horizontal shots next to vertical shots in order to have an impact, you know. And it's a lot of different things that go into the shots. But yeah, just trying to push through, just knowing, that's why I do the thumbnails early on, to kind of give myself a direction, a target to aim for, and then have the shots land on those targets. Like I know I wanted to land on this, and it's kind of fun to come off of something that's in a car and it's kind of intense and busy. Not busy. Hold on. This is useless. This would be much more involved in a real situation, but I'm just gonna, I apologize. Here we go. Hold on. I'll show you what I'm talking about with that as far as why I did certain cuts. I'll pitch through it and then do that real quick and then we'll be done. I promise. Here we go. So the reason I'm shading this in is because you're going to this is all, you kind of want your audience to feel things peripherally. Like they're going to be looking at this car, and I know that this big shape is going to have to come in. So you'll see it on the side of your eye until your eye focuses on it. Okay, let's pitch it. I'm going to pitch it real quick. See what we got. So we see an empty thing, empty cityscape, and this guy, the character runs in. Bobby, we'll call him Bobby. Bobby runs in with his Back to the Future vest, and he goes, "Cindy!" He looks around. He should be more nervous, panicked looking, and then, whoops, crashes. Turns around, looks up, dun, 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 you know, the music, whatever, and he's like, "Oh crap!" Screams at him, and the car grabs him, smash, just saved him. He's like, "Oh crap! Thanks, man. Whatever." What does he say? Where is she? Have you? Oh, the robot. Where is she? Have you found her yet? I don't know. She could be anywhere. And then turns the the wheel, and he goes, whoa, and he falls into the side of the car, and then quiet shot, comes in, lands through, and he goes, and he drives off, and then we go into the pan. So that's that.
That was awesome. Very, very well done. And I think that's a great point or place, I guess, where we can wrap it up.
Yeah, cool.
For all of those in attendance, thank you very much for participating in today's live webinar session with Stephen for Storyboarding for Animation. For those of you whose questions I did not get a chance to ask, please just forgive me for that. We didn't have enough time to get to your question, but what I will try to do is put the questions in the email form that we can send over to Stephen, and hopefully he has some time to go through them and answer them for you. But beyond that, take a look at his class as well on our website. For those of you who haven't checked it out, just go to www.cgmwmasterclasses.com, and you can find more information about his class as well as other programs that we have on our site. But beyond that, I have to say thank you very much, Stephen, for giving us part of your Saturday. We really appreciate it, and what you did was incredibly awesome. So thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Hope to talk to you guys later. Check out my blog, clockroom.blogspot. Maybe I'll try to edit this together so you can watch it, the final piece.
Awesome. That would be perfect. So again, thank you, and enjoy. Bye.